There's a rebellion in the Pathfinder 2e community right now of people complaining that casters are too weak. Some of the people who oppose them are people I would call assholes. Welcome to the Rules Lawyer channel, where I seem to be focusing a lot lately on drama that I see happening in the online TTRPG communities, and as you can see, this isn't the last video I'm planning in a series. In Pathfinder 2e land, there's been a rebellion of players who've been long frustrated by their experience with spellcasters in the system. Long simmering feelings have come to the surface since it's been made clear that in the remaster coming out this November, the designers are going to be removing ability modifier from cantrip damage and spells going forward. It's been a long-standing frustration, especially among players coming from older editions who come in with certain expectations that are not met with casters in Pathfinder 2e. And I plan a video on how to caster good. And if you support my Patreon, you can see an exclusive video where members of my Discord and I brainstorm ideas for that video. But that's not who I'm addressing today. In the Pathfinder 2e community, there is a real tendency among some people to react to such players, not just players of casters, but people generally who have frustrations with Pathfinder 2e who have not grokked the meta yet. For example, things like it being a team game. There's a tendency to treat them in a non-helpful, gatekeeping, and elitist way that I think needs to be called out. One of Pathfinder 2e's strengths is that you cannot win at character creation. You cannot build a character that breaks the game or single-handedly wins encounters. While in PF2, optimizers agree that there are some party compositions that are better than others because it's more about optimizing the party instead of your individual character. Even then, they would agree that it's more important the decisions you make in combat than the ones you made while making your party. You can have a great party composition, but if you don't play well, you will die. And personally, I like that about Pathfinder 2e, that when the GM says roll initiative, it stiffens your back. Victory is not assured. We can have our crunchy tactical game, but if there's not a possibility of failure, then why engage deeply with the tactics? For me, it's like the hot sauce to the dish. You need that danger for the tactics to be engaging. But the reality is that not everyone was going to play at the same level that you or I might. And some people, no matter how much advice you give them and tips and helping them in building their character, will still struggle and not perform at the same level. And that's okay. Not every player is the same. And we all go to tabletop RPGs wanting different things and being good at different things. With Pathfinder 2e, because it has the strength of having an accurate encounter building system, if you have a party where the builds and the players are less optimal, you can always adjust the encounters to get a desired level of difficulty, whatever that is. And you can lower things at the learning stages for a group, or make it a permanent adjustment for whatever reason. So, why am I making this video? I was prompted to do this because of something that happened recently on Facebook. Jerome, a friend and player in one of my online streamed campaigns, he's the man in this center top here, is a person like me who wants the Pathfinder 2e community to grow and sees a huge opportunity this year with the various scandals Wizards of the Coast has committed to welcome a lot of migrants over coming from D&D 5th edition. He also is a teacher by profession, and I, for several years, taught a tabletop role-playing game after school middle school class. And so I feel like he and I share many of the same attitudes towards shepherding new players into the game. And as you can see, he was part of the chat I had with people in my Discord prepping for my How to Caster Good video. And when someone said that if a person either dislikes or is having difficulty with the crunch or tactics or difficulty of Pathfinder 2e, maybe it's not the best game for them. Which, in general, is a statement I agree with, depending on how it's said, of course. And Jerome had this to say, which I think is important before I describe what happened on Facebook.
So I do want to note that gatekeeping is very dangerous when you are not number one in the marketplace. And Paizo and Pathfinder are not number one in the marketplace. And so I think we should really be careful about going, you should play this game, because I'd like there to be a Pathfinder 3rd edition one day, please. So in looking at those players who do want that, I do think there's a level of empathy we should have. This is one of the things we discussed in the last session.
So that should give you a sense of who Jerome is and what he's thinking. Well, soon after this talk, and maybe prompted by the discussion we had there, he posted this on the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Facebook group, which says, "Hot take. Pathfinder 2e assumes a few certain tactics, someone buffing, debuffing, etc. If your players are not tactically minded, pull back the difficulty and keep everyone having fun." Now, first off, the majority of people thought this was great advice and gave it the thumbs up. Over 150 people, in fact. And I've heard anecdotes of people starting their campaigns or adventure paths at level 2, or giving bonus hit points to a party at level 1 to help them with that initial level 1 experience. Even Mark Seifter, one of the co-designers of Pathfinder 2e, who now works for Roll for Combat, said this was a perfectly fine variant that some GMs could use. And many of the comments also contributed to the post. And then there were some other comments. Here's one of them. Or don't. Maybe they should learn to play the game with your help instead of being coddled. Here's another. Or just consider helping them learn. With many people agreeing with that person, apparently. First, to state the obvious, they just assumed something about the OP, which was not true. That he's not someone who tries to help his players. And in fact, I would trust someone who makes a post like Jerome did in actually having empathy and being helpful to new players than these commenters. But assuming or not, they pushed back against the idea of adjusting the difficulty of Pathfinder 2e. Thou shalt not adjust the game is their commandment. The truth is, the default difficulty of Pathfinder 2e is not for everybody. And level 1, when many players start playing the game, is tougher than the higher levels. Now, I'm somebody who enjoys Pathfinder myself at level 1, but I'm also one of those masochists who like to play games like XCOM at the highest difficulty at Iron Man. And XCOM, for those of you who don't know, has a phrase that people use when something goes horribly wrong, like a 1% chance of failure actually happens, called "That's XCOM, baby." And then there's people who like to play Dwarf Fortress, where their slogan is "Losing is fun." I venture to say that such attitudes are not the majority of people who play tabletop role-playing games. And the truth is, you can play well in this game, and those dice will be really horrible. And something you quickly learn, and the game learns you to do a set of things to account for the worst-case scenario. But back to Jerome's thoughtful post. He never said he wasn't teaching his players. He's just putting out there that there's something that GMs have in their toolbox that they might not think to do on their own or think they have permission to do. And this absolutely is not mutually exclusive to teaching. And Jerome and I are both people who teach. And we also know through experience, I'm sure Jerome would confirm, that sometimes adversity and failure is a setback to learning. And sometimes it's a barrier to them coming back and playing more.
I like being the most tactical that I need to be. So whenever I'm playing like Fire Emblem, I'll turn it up to the highest difficulty, and that's me. But some people, they want to play games even on a mode where your character is literally invincible just to see the story, and that's fine too. In fact, it's an accessibility concern in some cases that some people just kind of literally like get nervous or have anxiety whenever the encounter has any amount of challenge to it. It actually makes them feel bad about themselves for their decision making, and they start second guessing themselves.
And also, there are people who you can tell them buff, debuff, use your third action, set things up for your allies, but that's not exactly what they're looking for in their role-playing game. Or it's something that they just can't do at the same level as some other players. You basically need to know your table and communicate with them. And a perfect example of this is my Abomination Vault campaign, where I've been teaching and running Pathfinder 2e for D&D YouTubers, where they had a setback. They were facing a tough higher level foe, and I asked them if I should be giving more advice and tips during play, if they wanted me to do that. And they said no. Maybe adjust some encounters a bit, some of these solo higher level enemies, maybe those could be tweaked a bit downward. But no, during play, don't give us tips. That would feel like coddling. And let us learn things on our own. so basically, listen to your players, read the room, talk to them outside of the session, try to diagnose problems and come up with solutions. Basically, don't be an inflexible asshole. Again, the assumptions and manner of thinking behind these comments on the screen suggest to me that they lack the most important ingredient of teaching. They're inflexibly saying that there's one way to play Pathfinder 2e, and if you depart from that, you are wrong. But that's wrong. Even good players, quote unquote, good strategic players in Pathfinder 2e, let's call them, know that sometimes some party compositions are stronger than others. For example, not having a healer in your party could pose an issue, and would want the freedom to build around their concept and not take healing feats or the medic archetype, or choose a background that doesn't have battle medicine. Again, it's a strength of Pathfinder 2e that we have an accurate encounter building system that lets us adjust adventures for such situations. It's not a judgment about the group at all. And to those who boast that they play at the default difficulty level, I would show them my Fists of the Ruby Phoenix group, where I have upped the difficulty beyond what's written in the campaign. Ha! There's a group that outperforms you. Do you see what I'm getting at? You're being smug and proud of nothing. Now, there was a YouTuber a couple of years back who stopped running Pathfinder 2e, who said that his players had a TPK, total party kill, and also, probably after the TPK this problem became worse, of feeling like they had to do the same thing every turn, and it described them as optimal rotations. Now, the reality of what happened in this campaign is more complex, and I did a 5-hour stream responding in part to his videos and including some of the accounts of those players. But the obvious advice to the GM in this case, when the players were feeling like they had to do the optimal thing, was to lower the difficulty of the adventure. And this GM was running the Age of Ashes adventure path, which is considered by many to be overtuned, having some parts of the adventure being too difficult and not following what are now best practices in adventure path adventure design. Now, when we look at these comments, whereas that YouTuber was mistaken in thinking that to be optimal in Pathfinder 2e, you have to do the same thing every turn, the attitude of these commenters is simply a more informed version of the same wrong attitude. Only that the optimal rotation is now replaced with the optimal way to play. And we don't want, as a growing hobby around an awesome role-playing game system, to tell people that there is an optimal way to play the game, and that is the only way to play the game, when not everybody wants to engage in that kind of play, or is capable enough of doing it so that the game just doesn't feel like a grind where there's TPKs or a death every other session. All right, let's move on to more bad comments. This next one. Hot take. Chess assumes few certain tactics. Attacking the castled king, mate in 2 moves, pull back the difficulty and play checkers to keep everyone having fun. Now, this is just lampooning Jerome and is condescending towards both him and his players. Someone did point out that he was rude, and he said, well, it's just an opinion, man. Well, this was insulting, and I don't need to explain how. I have seen the comparison of Pathfinder 2e being chess and D&D 5e being checkers, with different degrees of condescension. And this is an example of being shitty and condescending toward 5e players. And if you recognize that certain use of phrase, it's because you're well steeped in the Rules Lawyer cinematic universe. And let's be real. Some people in the geek community, Pathfinder 2e is definitely not excluded from that, get their rocks off thinking that they are superior to other people. And being good at Pathfinder 2e, at least they think they are, is part of their identity. This next one is a more polite version of the same issue. It says, in a way, if your players are not tactically minded, Pathfinder 2e may not be the best game for them, even if you pull down the difficulty so everything is a walk at the park. What separates PF2 from 5e aside from extra feats that most of the newbies will not even read? No game is for everyone, no class is for everyone, and this is fine, really. There are a lot of players who are there for the story you're telling, and the game is there second. Though, if that's the case, there are plenty of rules-light games that will make them happier. Okay, first, as a general proposition, there are some people who want to play TTRPGs who don't want to be in crunchy games, heavy games like Pathfinder 2e. But let's assume for a second that people who are playing a game with a 650-page rulebook are not idiots and know what they're signing up for. On that in a second. But here we see the assumption that tuning it down means making it a walk at the park and talking about 5e and newbies who will not even read. Here we see a dogma saying that there's one true way to play Pathfinder 2e and it's mine. It's like those people who say the only acceptable sex is between a man and a woman and in the missionary position, but there's many ways to party. But newsflash! Your game is not good at one thing only. There are people who are not tactically minded to meet your satisfaction, who like Pathfinder 2e for its many strengths. Not just being a challenge, if you want it to be, but for its 3-action economy, unparalleled character customization, having cool powers, having fun, evocative monsters with memorable abilities, having a working and counterbalance system that gives a reliable challenge. There are people who want these things of Pathfinder 2e, but might need the difficulty tuned down. There's nothing difficult about this. Bring the skill you have to the game to life. And now a video game analogy. I just mentioned XCOM before. And there are people who want to play XCOM because they want to shoot aliens and want to play a fun squad-based, turn-based tactical game with cool powers. But they're not going to play Commander or Legend difficulty, but will play something lower, and that's okay. The video companies know this. Now I, Ronald the Rules Lawyer, may have beaten Legend difficulty on Iron Man, but I see no need to put other people down to know myself that I'm good at tactical games. Life's too short, and let's make more friends. There are many potential friends coming from D&D 5e and from the new zeitgeist happening around tabletop role-playing games right now. So, send us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of Wizards of the Coast teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest-tossed, to Pathfinder 2e as we lift our lamp beside the golden door. So, in sum, there is a renaissance of tabletop role-playing games right now, and there's a renaissance within the renaissance with Wizards of the Coast pushing a lot of people away and trying out other games. With many 5e migrants and other people checking out Pathfinder 2e this year, the takeaway is don't be a dick. Wheaton's Law. In the end, Pathfinder 2e made it so that decisions in combat, in play, are more important than the decisions you made in making your character. And the reason for that is not just to provide a satisfying tactical game. It was to open up the game to a wider variety of players, so that the person who milked every last drop of optimization out of their build can be at the same table as someone who put character first in making their character. And at such a table, those people who are not assholes could help the others. So, if your table is having trouble in Pathfinder 2e and you're the GM, don't just kill your players thoughtlessly, and don't kill their characters thoughtlessly either. Consider making it easier to survive at your table. Sure, I personally prefer the default difficulty of Pathfinder 2e most of the time, but that's also because I like my decisions mattering and that if I lose, it's kind of my fault. But not everyone's like that. It's kind of like hot sauce. And there's a reason Taco Bell provides different levels of hot sauce, and there's a reason every video game gives us different levels of difficulty. Because in the end, it's a game. We're all finding ways to have our own different kinds of fun. And we are a community in a social hobby. This is a social game. And I'm just going to call out people who don't treat it that way and see it as just a way to confirm their own pathetic sense of themselves and stroke their own egos. So that's it. That's my rant for today. I'm going to continue on other similar topics that are pissing me off, but also do coverage of Pathfinder 2e and other games. So if you like the video, click like and subscribe and support my Patreon, where there's 7-day early access to most of my videos and exclusive videos. And also consider joining my Discord community, which has an awesome community that talks about Pathfinder 2e and other games. So I'm done. I will see you next time.